The chill bites first. You crouch in the mud beside a broken Roman road somewhere in northern Gaul, the air thick with the smell of rain and iron. Your fingers are numb, half buried in a trench that once carried legions. The wind moans through the hollows of the ruined fort above you, carrying the scent of wet moss and smoke from a farmer's distant hearth. The earth gives way beneath your trowel, soft as bread, and something metallic glints between clumps of soil. You brush it free, expecting a coin or buckle, but what you lift is stranger. A small bronze shape, cold as river stone, catches the grey daylight in 12 faces. Each side is a perfect pentagon, punctured by a round hole of different size, its edges worn smooth by centuries. Tiny knobs rise from every corner, like the heads of nails hammered by patient hands. Mud clings to it in dark veins, and the hollow interior swallows the sound when you tap it with your fingernail. Behind you, another worker calls out in Latin, his voice echoing down the trench. You hardly hear him. You tilt the object toward the sky, and the rain slips through one hole, striking the opposite side with a soft metallic ring. For a moment, it feels alive, a breathing thing. The overseer approaches, boots sinking in the muck. He squints, his face drawn tight beneath the edge of his hood. "Just a toy," he mutters, already looking elsewhere, counting stones, counting time. He doesn't see how the light bends inside the bronze shell, how the holes seem to align like the sights of a weapon or the eyes of a god. You wipe the mud from your hands and stare again. Through one opening, the fort's crumbling tower appears perfectly framed, distant but centered. You shift the object, and the tower vanishes. Another angle, another hole, another perfect circle of view. It feels deliberate, precise. You try to imagine who once held it. A soldier, a priest, a craftsman measuring the sun. Thunder rolls over the valley. The others retreat toward the wagons, shouting for cover. You stay, kneeling in the rain, the artifact resting in your palm like a captured secret. In the storm's flicker, the bronze glows briefly, almost golden, as if remembering something it was meant to do. You pocket it, heart pounding. For reasons you can't name, it feels heavier than it should, and somewhere beneath the roar of the storm, you swear it hums. Centuries after the empire's fall, fragments of its forgotten brilliance began to surface once more. The first recorded discoveries of these peculiar bronze dodecahedra appeared during the early 18th century, unearthed by farmers and road builders across the mist-soaked fields of northern Europe. At first, no one recognized them as Roman at all. They seemed too abstract, too mathematical, to belong to an age of swords and shields. Only later did archaeologists realize they were remnants of a civilization that had once measured its world in marble, blood, and geometry. The earliest find that drew scholarly attention came from a field near Reims in France, not far from where Julius Caesar had once marched his legions through the lands of the Remi tribe. Others soon emerged in places equally distant and unlikely: Bath in Britain, Bonn in Germany, and Avenches in Switzerland. Each one was similar, yet not identical. The shapes varied slightly in size, the holes differed in diameter, and the metalwork carried faint traces of regional style. These were not mass-produced items, but deliberate, local creations, each one made with care and purpose. By the middle of the 19th century, museums began collecting them. Curators at the British Museum and the Rheinisches Landesmuseum in Bonn placed them behind glass, labeling them cautiously as Roman object, purpose unknown. They stood in neat rows beside coins, armor fragments, and pottery, yet seemed to belong to none of those worlds. Their form suggested precision, but their context was chaos. No ancient text described them, no Roman inventory mentioned them, and no temple or fortress had yet revealed one in situ with clear purpose. What puzzled researchers most was their geography. They were found only in the far reaches of the empire, in lands that once resisted Roman rule. Nowhere in Italy, Greece, or the heart of the empire had one ever been found. It was as if these objects belonged not to Rome's glory, but to its periphery, to the thin line where civilization met mystery. In an era when archaeology was still young, scholars speculated wildly. Some called them ornaments, others believed them to be ritual instruments, and a few thought them relics of a forgotten science. But every new discovery deepened the riddle. By the late 19th century, more than 70 had been catalogued, yet not a single explanation held firm. The earth kept offering them up, one by one, as if Rome itself were whispering a question no one could answer. To understand the enigma, one must first stand where Rome's order met the wild edges of Europe. Picture the northern frontiers during the 2nd and 3rd centuries, when the empire's reach stretched from the Rhine to the North Sea. Here, in the provinces once called Gallia Belgica and Germania Inferior, Roman discipline mingled uneasily with Celtic tradition. Legionary fortresses rose beside sacred groves, bathhouses steamed near tribal longhouses, and Latin words echoed over landscapes older than empire itself. These were lands of exchange, where soldiers, traders, and priests carried not just goods but ideas. Roman glassware glinted in markets that still sold charms of bone and amber. In this strange coexistence, art and craft blended languages. Local smiths adopted Roman metalworking techniques, melting down old bronze coins and armory scraps to cast objects that shimmered with mixed heritage. Among such cross-currents, the dodecahedron emerged neither purely Roman nor purely native, but something born of both. Archaeologists found many of these artifacts near ancient garrisons such as Carnuntum in modern Austria and along the Limes Germanicus, the fortified border that once divided civilization from chaos. These sites reveal traces of soldiers, surveyors, and engineers, men trained to measure, build, and conquer. Yet scattered among military relics lay items of devotion, amulets, figurines of household gods, and now the dodecahedra. Their coexistence blurred the line between science and superstition, between measurement and magic. Some dodecahedra were discovered in graves, placed beside jewelry or tools, suggesting they held personal or spiritual significance. Others appeared near workshops, as if they belonged to craftsmen or artisans who valued geometry as much as beauty. In Gaulish towns like Tongeren and Orton, fragments of Roman temples reveal carvings of 12-pointed stars and pentagonal motifs, subtle echoes of the same form, repeating like an idea that refused to die. Life on these frontiers was harsh but vibrant. The legions policed the borders, but it was the locals who kept the empire alive through trade and production. Roads carried more than soldiers. They carried stories. Perhaps the dodecahedron travelled with them, a symbol of unity and diversity, or a tool understood only by those who worked between worlds. As the empire's heart beat in marble palaces, its edges hummed with experiment. The Roman dodecahedron may have been one of those frontier inventions, a product of hands that refused to separate faith from function. In the north, beneath cold skies and restless borders, geometry had found its frontier. Imagine holding one in your hands. It fits perfectly within the palm, neither heavy nor fragile, a small sphere of symmetry and silence. 12 faces, each a pentagon, each carved with a round aperture that varies in diameter from one to the next. Through these openings, the world appears sliced into fragments of light and shadow. Around every edge sit precise spherical knobs, polished like droplets frozen in metal. The craftsmanship is unmistakably deliberate, the proportions balanced as though shaped by geometry itself rather than human hands. The dodecahedron is one of the most mathematically elegant forms known to antiquity. Plato described it as the shape of the heavens, the one solid that could symbolize the cosmos itself. Yet these Roman versions were not carved from marble or crystal, as philosophers once imagined, but cast in bronze, sometimes even gilded. Most measure between 4 and 11 centimeters across, with walls thin enough to let light slip through like breath. Some still bear traces of gold, leaf, or soot, hints of past handling and exposure to flame. Modern analysis of the surviving specimens reveals an extraordinary consistency. The holes on opposing faces often align perfectly, suggesting intentional optical or functional design. Each artifact was likely cast using the lost wax method, a technique perfected by Roman metallurgists. That process required precision, a wax model coated with clay, heated until the wax melted away, leaving a cavity to be filled with molten bronze. One mistake, and the object would collapse. These were not toys or trinkets made in haste. They were the result of skilled artisanship, perhaps commissioned for a purpose we still cannot name. Even the smallest details provoke wonder. On several examples, faint tool marks circle the holes, as if the craftsmen adjusted their diameters after casting. Others have edges smoothed by repeated touch, suggesting they were used often, perhaps rotated or aligned with care. Some were found alongside small coins from the reigns of emperors like Marcus Aurelius or Septimius Severus, dating their origin to the later centuries of Roman rule, a time when science and mysticism walked hand in hand. To look at one today is to see the intersection of intellect and intuition, logic and ritual. It embodies the Roman mind at its most paradoxical: engineers who built aqueducts yet read omens in the flight of birds, soldiers who measured battle lines by the stars. The dodecahedron is both instrument and icon, a silent diagram in metal, forever waiting for someone to remember what it once measured. When the first dodecahedra emerged from European soil during the Enlightenment, scholars and collectors faced a puzzle that no ancient text could solve. The 18th and 19th centuries were an age of confident classification, when every object was expected to fit neatly into a known category: weapon, coin, ornament, or tool. Yet this strange 12-faced shape refused to obey. Its geometry was too deliberate for decoration, its hollowness too impractical for storage, and its absence from Roman records too unsettling to ignore. Early antiquarians proposed ideas with the enthusiasm of explorers mapping uncharted lands. Some called them military standards, imagining legionaries carrying them atop poles to symbolize unity or command. The holes, they claimed, might have held colored stones or small ornaments that caught the sun during parade. But no depiction of such an emblem appears in any relief or mosaic, and the theory quietly faded. Others suggested a candlestick or lamp, citing traces of wax found in a few examples. To test this, Victorian collectors placed candles within replicas, only to discover that the thin metal walls overheated and warped. Moreover, the open holes allowed the flame to die quickly in a draught. The elegant geometry had little reason to serve something so simple. In France, some believed they were dice for ritual games, their 12 faces representing signs of the zodiac. A few antiquarians even called them astral dice, tools for divination or astrological teaching. Yet their holes made them impossible to roll fairly, and no Roman temple ever revealed evidence of such games. By the mid-19th century, a new theory emerged from the industrial imagination: precision instruments. Some speculated that soldiers or surveyors used them for range finding. If you knew the diameter of the holes and the size of an object in the distance, you could estimate how far away it stood when viewed through paired apertures. It was a neat idea, elegant on paper, and perfectly suited to the rational age. But when tested, the measurements proved unreliable. The variety of hole sizes across specimens meant no standard existed. One German archaeologist, Friedrich von Reber, declared in 1873 that the objects must have been personal talismans of the Roman engineer, merging superstition and science. It was a poetic guess, but still a guess. The more they studied the dodecahedron, the less it belonged to reason. It was as if the empire had left behind a fragment of thought, half logic, half prayer, and dared the modern world to choose which half to believe. By the 20th century, the mystery had only deepened. As archaeologists uncovered more examples from Britain to Hungary, the list of theories grew longer, stranger, and more inventive. Each new discovery seemed to contradict the last, proving that whatever the dodecahedron once did, it had not done it the same way everywhere. One of the most enduring modern theories is the knitting hypothesis. In the 1980s, a Dutch historian noted that the holes on several specimens could guide threads to create evenly sized loops. Using a 3D printed replica, hobbyists demonstrated how the device could weave tight, uniform fingers for woolen gloves, a garment commonly used in the colder Roman provinces. The idea went viral among experimental archaeologists, who delighted in seeing a practical solution emerge from the fog of mystery. Yet, when examined more closely, the explanation began to fray. The dodecahedra show no trace of fiber wear, no scratches from needles or hooks, and no standard size that would ensure matching gloves. Like many good stories, it seemed too neat, too modern in its logic. Another camp proposed an astronomical purpose. The 12 sides could correspond to the 12 zodiacal months, while the holes might allow sunlight to project specific patterns during certain times of the year. In theory, by observing which beam of light struck a marked surface, one could determine the equinox or the best date for sowing crops. This aligns beautifully with Rome's agricultural calendar and the empire's obsession with celestial order. Yet, without written instruction or consistent alignment among finds, the theory remains in the realm of possibility rather than proof. More daring suggestions veer toward the spiritual. Some researchers believe the dodecahedron served as a ritual object, perhaps for fortune-telling or offerings to household gods. The number 12 held deep symbolic value, representing wholeness and divine balance. To hold such a perfect shape might have been an act of reverence, a bridge between human craftsmanship and cosmic design. And then there are the speculative voices on the margins, the ones who whisper of ancient technology. They claim the object might have been a fragment of an optical instrument, a sighting tool for artillery, or even part of a long-lost mechanism akin to the Antikythera device. These theories blur into myth, but their persistence reveals something powerful. The dodecahedron's mystery refuses containment, forcing every generation to project its own imagination upon it. Each hypothesis is a reflection of its time. To the Romans, it may have been sacred geometry. To the Victorians, a machine. To us, a question that will not die. In the modern age, the mystery of the Roman dodecahedron has become a stage for curiosity itself. Across museums, universities, and backyard workshops, scholars and enthusiasts have tried to rebuild and test the object's possible functions. Each experiment brings the artifact briefly to life, even if only to remind us how little we truly know. One of the first systematic attempts came from experimental archaeologists in the 1960s. They created exact bronze replicas based on measurements from finds in Germany and Britain. Using these copies, they tested the surveying theory, setting up targets at fixed distances and peering through opposite holes. When viewed at just the right angle, the objects appeared to form a rudimentary rangefinder. Yet the precision required was so delicate, the measurements so inconsistent, that even seasoned engineers admitted defeat. No two dodecahedra matched perfectly. If they were instruments, they were designed without standardization, a strange choice for a civilization that measured roads to the inch. In the decades that followed, the astronomical hypothesis gained traction. A French researcher named Michel Lenoir built scaled models and placed them beneath controlled sunlight, charting the way beams passed through the holes at different times of day. He discovered that in certain orientations, the dodecahedron could indeed predict equinoxes or seasonal angles of the sun, though only approximately. It worked better as a symbolic compass than a precise scientific tool, an object meant to teach or represent cosmic harmony rather than calculate it. Meanwhile, artists and digital historians have used 3D scanning to map the surviving specimens. High-resolution imaging at the Römisch-Germanisches Museum in Cologne revealed subtle variations in hole alignment, suggesting individual craftsmanship rather than mass production. Each piece was slightly asymmetrical, the fingerprints of forgotten artisans still visible on the bronze surface. This discovery reinforced the idea that the dodecahedron was not part of standardized Roman equipment but a personalized creation, perhaps even custom-made for private use. Today, Replicas exist in classrooms, museums, and online laboratories. Some glow with projected light in planetariums. Others sit on desks of mathematicians as reminders of how beauty can outlast purpose. The public fascination has only grown with modern technology. Videos showing replicas spinning in sunlight or used as candle lanterns have reached millions of viewers, sparking debates that echo those of the 19th century. The experiments rarely yield answers, but they achieve something deeper. They return the dodecahedron to motion, to breath, to wonder. Each recreation is an act of dialogue with the past, a quiet agreement between ancient maker and modern seeker that mystery itself is worth preserving. Every civilization has its silent symbols, objects that seem to speak a language just beyond human reach. The Roman dodecahedron belongs to that realm where geometry becomes a kind of faith. In its 12 faces lies a philosophy that may have meant as much to the mind as it did to the hand that forged it. The ancients believed numbers held power, that shapes were not merely tools of measurement but reflections of the divine order. Plato called the dodecahedron the shape of the heavens, a solid representing the structure of the cosmos. Centuries later, Roman thinkers inherited those ideas, blending Greek geometry with their own fascination for balance and control. To imagine a Roman philosopher or engineer turning such an object in his hand is to glimpse the boundary between science and spirituality. The empire's architects measured aqueducts and temples with relentless logic, yet they built them according to celestial ratios and sacred numbers. Geometry was the bridge between the visible and the invisible, the means by which man could mirror the perfection of the gods. Perhaps the dodecahedron was not meant to do something practical, but to show something profound, the harmony of forms that holds the universe together. In this sense, the artifact becomes a meditation. The holes may have allowed beams of light to pass through in ways that made geometry visible, transforming a solid object into an instrument of revelation. When the sun struck bronze, when light traced the pentagonal shadows across a table or altar, it might have reminded its owner of the cyclical rhythm of time, the turning of seasons, or the order behind chaos. Some scholars see in its design the Roman obsession with control, with bringing symmetry to a world that resisted it. Others view it as an admission of mystery, an acknowledgement that even empire has limits. Its very uselessness may have been the point, a test of intellect, a reminder that not all things exist to be conquered or explained. The dodecahedron sits at the crossroads of two truths, the Roman belief in mastery and the human acceptance of wonder. It asks a question that feels almost modern. Can knowledge exist without purpose? Can beauty be its own justification? Perhaps, in the soft gleam of bronze and the quiet perfection of 12 faces, the Romans left behind not an answer, but a lesson. Some shapes are meant to be solved, and others are meant to be felt. For all the theories, for all the experiments and reconstructions, the Roman dodecahedron remains an unanswered question buried in bronze. Centuries of study have not brought it closer to explanation, only deeper into fascination. Each discovery, instead of resolving the puzzle, multiplies its contradictions. Archaeologists can tell where they were found, when they were cast, and even how they were made. Yet the one thing they cannot tell is why. In museums across Europe, rows of these 12-faced enigmas rest beneath glass. Visitors peer down at them, whispering possibilities. Candleholders, measuring devices, sacred charms, the same words spoken by scholars for 200 years. The museum labels still read the same phrase, purpose unknown. It is as if history itself has chosen silence. Even the pattern of discovery mocks neat conclusions. Some were found in the ruins of Roman villas, others in graves, still others in open fields with no sign of settlement. The materials vary from plain bronze to fine gilt, suggesting both ordinary and ceremonial uses. One was discovered near the River Saône in France, another in a temple precinct in Geneva, another in a soldier's burial near Wiesbaden. The contexts refuse to agree. No inscription, no mosaic, No carved relief anywhere in the empire shows a person holding or using one. This absence is louder than any evidence. The Romans recorded almost everything: tools, rituals, recipes, even jokes, and yet this, the most precise of their bronze creations, left no written trace. It is as if the dodecahedron belonged to a world of private understanding, a shared code among a few, never meant for the public record. In recent years, advanced scanning, metallurgical analysis, and even computer simulations have failed to reveal hidden mechanisms or secret alignments. The metal is solid, the geometry clear, and the mystery intact. Each attempt to quantify it only reinforces its elusiveness. The more we learn, the less we know. Perhaps that is why it endures. The dodecahedron has transcended its origin to become a mirror for the limits of human knowledge. Every generation sees in it a reflection of its own longing to explain, to master, to possess the truth. But some truths, it seems, prefer to remain just beyond reach. It sits there quietly, as it has for nearly 2,000 years, its hollow center filled with nothing but time, daring anyone to decide what it means. In every age, the Roman dodecahedron finds new eyes to marvel at it. From the first farmers who dug them out of French soil to the curators who now polish their glass cases, it has never lost its ability to provoke awe. It is a relic that defies explanation, not because it hides its purpose, but because it exposes something universal about us, the hunger to understand. Each of its 12 faces reflects a different century of curiosity. When the Enlightenment sought reason, it became an instrument. When the Victorians sought romance in ruins, it became a token of mystery. In our digital century, it has become an icon of the unknown, shared across screens and forums, its silhouette glowing on millions of devices. 2,000 years after it was cast, the dodecahedron has travelled farther than any Roman legion. It has crossed not empires, but imaginations. Some historians find its power precisely in its silence. The fact that it refuses to yield a single definitive answer turns it into a monument to uncertainty, an ancient reminder that progress is not the same as understanding. In a world that measures and defines everything, the dodecahedron remains beautifully defiant. Its hollowness feels deliberate, like a pause in conversation, an invitation to think rather than to know. Modern artists and mathematicians often borrow its form. You can find it in jewelry, architecture, even in the design of scientific models where its symmetry symbolizes order. Yet, the Roman artifact, from which they all descend, remains untamed by purpose. Its mystery has become its immortality. Perhaps that is why it survives when so many other Roman inventions faded. Aqueducts crumbled, roads eroded, empires fell. But this small bronze shape endures because it was never tied to function. It represents the one thing the Romans could not conquer, the unknown. If you hold a replica in your hand and let sunlight slip through its holes, you might feel it too, that quiet hum of connection between the present and the past. The same curiosity that moved its maker now moves you. Time folds, thought meets thought, and for a heartbeat, you share the same wonder. The dodecahedron has outlived its empire because mystery never dies. It only waits for someone else to look through the same circle of light and ask again what it was for. Imagine the excavation site again, the grey clouds rolling low, the hum of rain against bronze. Somewhere, beneath layers of soil and centuries, more dodecahedra still wait. Perhaps hundreds, perhaps none. Each one holds the same quiet defiance, an artifact that whispers not what it did, but that it was. And that, somehow, is enough. We spend lifetimes chasing certainty, measuring time in facts, and truth in evidence. Yet the Roman dodecahedron stands as a monument to another kind of wisdom, the courage to leave questions unanswered. It reminds us that history is not a ledger of conclusions, but a landscape of wonder, where mystery itself is the most enduring artifact. In the warm light of museums, children press their faces to the glass, watching sunlight ripple through the holes as though the object still breathes. Across continents, Digital explorers build replicas, spin them in software, and trace imaginary rays of ancient light. 2 millennia after the fall of Rome, we are still doing what its makers once did, searching for meaning in geometry, in metal, in the meeting of craft and curiosity. Perhaps the dodecahedron was never meant to reveal its purpose. Perhaps its very survival is the message that there will always be more to find, more to question, more to feel. The Romans built empires of stone, but it was this small shape of bronze that captured eternity. So the next time you walk through a museum or scroll through a photograph of one of these 12-faced enigmas, pause for a moment, look closely, let the light pass through it as it once did in some forgotten hand. Because, in that fleeting shimmer, the past is not gone. It's simply waiting, silent, geometric, and alive, for someone perhaps you to wonder again.